Jaguar Chapter 13, starting on page 132. "I was about ready to go up and look for you," Flana said when we got back on the board. Doc told her what had happened. "Are you sure this Fred explained the situation?" Doc's understanding of Portuguese wasn't very good, but he said he thought that Raoul understood. Silver came up from below for a second and got something out of the wheelhouse, then went back down without saying a word to us. "How's the engine?" Doc asked. "Silver and the mechanic have been arguing ever since they got down there. I feel sorry for the little man. Silver thinks we'll be underway again sometime tomorrow morning." "Silver won't kill him. He needs him to fix the engine." Doc sat on his hammock. Flana took out her kit and started to change his bandage. "I've got to do something about this Jaguar," Doc told her. "The problem is time. If only we could capture it quickly. We'd learn so much by tracking it at the preserve. The Jaguar would be like a guide. It's so frustrating." Doc wasn't frustrated. He was stimulated. This was the happiest he had been since we left Manius. "There's no time to put out a live trap, and I suspect the locals would tamper with it anyway," he continued. "They want the skin." "Did you offer Raoul money?" "He doesn't seem to be interested in money." "Perhaps I could go and talk to him," Flana suggested. "I know a few words of several dialects. Tranquilizing an animal is a very difficult concept to get across. He may have misunderstood." "It might be worth a try," Doc said. "Let's get something to eat, then we'll go back up to the camp." We didn't have to go back to the Indian camp because Raoul came to us, and he didn't come squandering down the dock. He came from the river in a dugout canoe. While we were eating, we heard a tapping sound on the starboard side. At first, we thought it was the engine repair noise from down below. The tapping got more insistent, and I took a look over the side. Raoul was standing in the canoe, knocking on the hull as if it were the front door of a house. "We have visitors," I announced. The canoe had 2 other men in it. They lifted Raoul onto their shoulders so he could reach the rail. Flana and I helped him the rest of the way up. When he got on deck, he glanced nervously towards the dock and whispered something. "He says that he came from the water so he wouldn't attract attention," Flana translated. "His Portuguese is excellent." Doc quickly pulled the mosquito netting down, and Raoul began to relax, somewhat. Raoul talked quietly for several minutes. Flana listened, asked questions, commented, smiled, and even laughed a couple of times. When he was finished, she said, "I'll give you the short version. Raoul is certain that he can help you capture the Jaguar. He didn't tell you that this afternoon because he was afraid that some of the hunters in town might try to stop him if they knew. But before he agrees, he has a couple of conditions." "Fantastic," Doc said. He was very excited, and it was good to see. "The first is that he wants to look at the tranquilizer darts, and you have to explain how they work." "No problem." "And after you've captured the Jaguar, he wants to take it to town and have it weighed." "Why?" I didn't quite understand this part, but I think he wants to pacify the people in town who've entered the betting pool. "Okay," Doc said, but he didn't like the idea. I'm sure his preference was to take the Jaguar and run. "And finally," Flana continued, "Raoul wants to go with us to the preserve and see the Jaguar set free." Doc and I were both surprised by this. "Doesn't he trust us?" Doc asked. "I don't think it's that." "Does he understand that we'll be at the preserve for at least a couple of months?" "Yes, and he still wants to go." Doc had to think about this one for a while. "Silver's not going to like the idea, but he's not in charge of the expedition. Tell Raoul that if we don't get the Jaguar, he doesn't go with us." Flana explained. Raoul nodded, then said, "I get Jaguar." I guess he spoke a little English, too. Doc got his tranquilizing equipment. You'll do the honors. You'll have to do the honors, Jake. I can't do it one-handed. Flana explained how it all worked. As I put the darts together, the darts used for cats are about 3 inches long. The shaft where the gun is held is made out of hollow aluminum tube threaded on the inside of both ends. The tubes are reusable. I put a rubber plunger into one end of the shaft. I then took a brass gunpowder cap and the size of a .22 and set it in the plunger. I screwed a cap over the top of this. The end cap has a tuft of cotton sticking from it, which is how the air rifle pushes the dart out of the barrel. I flipped the shaft over, ready to put the tranquilizer drug into it. Flana showed Raoul the little bottles of drugs and tried to explain how it worked. He looked at the bottle carefully, obviously confused by this part of the procedure. Doc told me how much of each type of drug to put into the shaft. When it was full, I screwed the needle onto the end. Doc showed Raoul the dart rifle. Doc held his hand over the barrel and dry fired it to prove to Raoul that nothing harmless without the dart in it. That it was harmless without the dart in it. Raoul put his own hand over the end of the barrel and nodded for Doc to pull the trigger. He smiled when he felt the puff of air come out. He said something to Flana, and she laughed. He said it works like a blowgun. Exactly. When the demonstration was finished, Raoul climbed back over the side and got into the canoe. He said that he would return sometime before sunrise the next morning. What are we going to tell Silver? I asked. Nothing at this point, Doc said. We'll worry about it later if we capture the Jaguar. The chances of that are pretty slim. Raoul shut up about half an hour before sunrise, carrying a small, dirty cotton bag over his shoulder. He handed the bag up to me and said something to Flana. These are his things for the trip upriver, Flana said. The bag was nearly empty. I guess he believed in traveling light. I put it under my hammock. Raoul brought 3 canoes and 3 men to help us. We lowered the equipment to them quietly so we wouldn't wake Silver. I was afraid Scarlet would hear us and call out, but she must have gone on another shore leave. Once we were in the canoes, they pushed off and started paddling against the current. It was a very dark night, and I could hardly see anything ahead of us, but the men paddling didn't seem to have a problem navigating through the darkness. The insects swarmed all over us, despite the insect repellent we had smeared on. We paddled upriver a couple of miles until we came to a small tributary. We followed the tributary for another mile, then stopped. Raoul got out and motioned for us to stay in the canoes. He went off into the forest and was gone for about half an hour. By the time he returned, it was light out. He spoke to Flana in a soft whisper. He says the Jaguar is female. How does he know that? Doc asked. Flana shrugged her shoulders. He wants us to follow him with the rifle and darts. When we have the Jaguar, he'll call the other men and they'll bring the rest of the equipment. Raoul moved through the forest with the grace of a deer. His toes were splayed out and twisted from a lifetime of walking barefoot over uneven terrain. He came to a small open area and stopped. He whispered to Flana. He wants to know who was going to dart the Jaguar. Jake's the shooter, Doc said. I can't do it with my bum hand. Doc had taught me to use the dart rifle while I was a little kid. Okay, Flana said. We're to wait here and stay out of sight. Raoul will position Jake up ahead and call the Jaguar to him. He's going to call the Jaguar? Doc asked in surprise. That's what he says. This I've got to see. You have everything, Jake? I slipped a loaded dart into the breech of the rifle. I'm ready. You'll only get one chance. I nodded and followed Raoul deeper into the forest. He stopped at the base of the huge tree and positioned me near the trunk behind a tangle of vines. He pointed to a spot about 20 feet away. I guess this is where he thought the Jaguar was going to appear. I lay down in a prone position. When I was comfortable, I lifted the safety off and brought the butt of the rifle up to my shoulder. Raoul moved off to my right, disappearing from view. For a long time, nothing happened. Sweat trickled down my face. Insects buzzed all around me, and it took all of my willpower to resist swatting them away. I heard a bird call to my right. I wondered when Raoul was going to start. The bird called again, and I realized that Raoul had already started. I didn't know what kind of bird he was imitating, but the call certainly sounded genuine. Several minutes passed. My neck began to cramp. I started to wonder how Raoul knew where the jaguar was going to appear. What if the cat came up behind me, or over to my left? Stop it, Jake. Think like you're stalking. Breathe. Concentrate on the spot. There's nothing but the spot. I saw a leaf move in the clump of palms in front of me. There was a shift in the forest, as if the volume had been turned down. The jaguar was here. She wanted the bird. I saw her head first. Yellow fur spotted with black rosettes. Bright golden eyes. Her stocky, powerful body moved low to the ground as she placed each foot with infinite care before taking the next step. I didn't move. I took long, slow breaths. I wanted to put the dart in her thick haunch muscle. Wait for the rosette to come to you. Wait. Pop! I hadn't consciously pulled the trigger. The sound startled me. When the dart hit, she jumped straight up and let out the chest-rattling roar. She bit angrily at the dart in her haunch, tearing it out of her leg. She licked her wound, then walked away. I waited. 5 minutes passed. Someone touched me on the shoulder. Raoul. I stood up and worked the kink out of my neck. Doc and Flana came over. Nice shot, Jake. Doc looked at his watch. We'll give her a few more minutes to make sure she's completely out. Flana told Raoul what we were doing. We found her about 50 yards away, lying on her side. Raoul's men came up with a medical kit and the stretcher to carry her back to the boat. Doc checked the jaguar's breathing and squeezed some ointment into her open eye so they wouldn't dry out. He looked at her teeth. I'd say she's 4 or 5 years old, if it is a she. He lifted her hind leg. Damn! What? She has milk, which means she has cubs somewhere. Flana explained the situation to Raoul. He nodded and took off to the forest with one of his men. About 10 minutes later, Raoul came back alone. He found the cubs, Flana said. He thinks there are 2 of them. He led us to the den, which was under a tree near a small stream. Doc bent down and shone his flashlight inside. 2 sets of eyes. I guess they're 3 or 4 months old, close to being weaned. She's probably been bringing dog meat back to them for weeks. It's going to take a while to get them out of here. Maybe we should take their mom back to the boat before she comes out of the drug. Then come back to get them. We can bring some crates back to put the cubs in. I don't think they'll leave the den, but someone should stay here and make sure.